Hi guys, welcome to the Clubhouse. We've got another incredible guest this week. His name is Nick Butter. He's run a marathon in every country of the world. That's 196 marathons in 675 days. He's a world record holder. He's an inspirational guy. He's had some scary moments along the way, but some amazing moments as well. He's here to tell his story, and he did it for one amazing cause. It's an unimaginable feat, and we've got him on the Clubhouse. So Nick, thank you very much for taking the time out. Very exciting for me to have you on today and to be able to talk to you. First of all, you're a man that's experienced the feeling of isolation and probably a little bit of loneliness whilst traveling the world. How are you dealing with life under the current restrictions?
Yeah, wow. I mean, I'm definitely in quite a unique space because not only have I experienced the isolation side, having traveled around the world for 2 years on my own, but secondly, I live in a van. And I suppose thirdly, I've been seeing the world where a lot of people now can't see the world, and so when I look at all of those shots of different places of abandoned streets, I've been there, most of them, and it's just absolutely shocking. But in terms for me, for lockdown, a lot hasn't changed in the sense that because I live in a van, I'm confined to those walls anyway. The problem is that the benefits of the van is that you can go anywhere. And so I can't do that anymore. And so it kind of takes away the whole point of being in a van. And so that's frustrating. But at the same time, it's been very cozy. I mean, it was heavy raining last night. And, that kind of on the roof of this converted Mercedes Sprinter that we have, it is kind of cool. But no, I probably live in a little bit of a different reality because I'm not in the normal kind of payroll of a normal 9 to 5. And I'm also planning stuff that's happening like several years in advance. And so everything is kind of a bit weird, as is with everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. But you've also managed to remain relatively active as well. You recently ran a marathon around your van too.
Yeah, absolutely. I do, at the moment, I'm doing about 16, sometimes 15, 16 miles a day, out and about, and maybe try and top that up in the evenings with a few more just to try and top it over the 120, 130 mile a week mark. And that's just because I want to keep my legs ticking over, and it's my peace of mind. And I think there is this massive running revolution at the moment, which is happening, not necessarily just running, but lots of sports, and people are getting on their bikes indoors, people are doing yoga they've never done before, people are like cycling for the first time in like 10 years. And for me, I'm outdoors all the time running. And now I'm seeing, I actually see virtually nobody because where I am, I'm literally running in the countryside and I see nobody. Before I moved here about 3 or 4 weeks ago, because we were moved on by the police because we weren't allowed to be in the van where we were. I just kept seeing loads and loads of people out. And so we have this boom of sport. And yeah, you say I ran around my van. I did that in solidarity of all the people that have to stick indoors, and my parents, bless them, that haven't been able to go anywhere on their own. They're in their 70s. And so, yeah, I did that. I ran around lots of smaller loops in the world as well.
Now, before we get on to the incredible world record that you broke, please can I just sort of take things back to the start with you? Have you always been an endurance athlete?
No, from birth, I didn't do any running. I guess I guess everybody is born into different environments, different scenarios, and yeah, I love sport. I wasn't particularly academic at school. I wasn't too bad, but sport was definitely where my heart lay. And so I suppose my life story is love sport, lived in the countryside, did a lot of cycling and running just to see friends. I'd run 10 miles to school, cycle 10 miles to school sometimes, and back again. And so that was definitely a base fitness as a kid. I ran my first marathon when I was 11, and then dropped it. Like, I didn't do running. Running when you're 11 that far is brutal and you hate it. And so I didn't do it afterwards. I then kind of went into school and then went into skiing. I was in the under-19s ski team for a while, did some proper professional skiing. And that was my love of sport. And I had the voice of my parents on my shoulder telling me that I should probably get a real job because I need to pay the bills. And so fortunately I went into finance, banking, earned some money, and then at the same time simultaneously degraded my soul, and sport was still in my blood. And so I thought, I need to go and do some more running, kind of use it as therapy, which it definitely is for me now. And so I I got into running, and I started to run longer distances. You know, I'm not a fast runner. I am not a good runner. People always look at me as like the marathon man. I'm not a good marathon runner. I can assure you of that. I just love it, and I plod slowly, and I get the job done.
Now, 196 marathons in every country, no exceptions. Every country of the world is pretty mind-boggling for somebody like me. And then you completed the challenge as well in 675 days, which I cannot comprehend. And we'll discuss that. When did the idea come to you? Was it one day during normality when you were sat at your desk at work?
So no, I mean, I've been running quite a few, for a few years before I had this mad dream. You know, I've done lots of events. I've done kind of mini expeditions. I'd attempted some records. I was in the running world, in my mind, fully fledged. And I was actually running out in the Sahara Desert. Marathon des Sables, as many runners will know, brutal event, very, very hot. It's a week-long race, 280 kilometers through 50-odd degree heat. And I met a guy called Kevin Webber. He was the one that tipped me over the edge, basically. He was this tall, bald chap, overly happy, 49 at the time. And he told me that he had terminal prostate cancer. And he was running alongside me, cheery and happy. And I thought, what is this connection between this guy that I'm running with in the middle of the Sahara, that he's telling me he's got cancer and yet he's happy, and I'm spending time with him? What is this all about? And he was given as little as 2 years to live, so he was in a really, really crappy situation. And so I thought, right, what is this guy all about? And it dawned on me that he understands, and totally understands to his soul, the benefits and the privilege that we have, the huge, unfathomably massive privilege that we have for life, and that we take a lot of it for granted. And he was kind of woken up to that when he had his diagnosis. And together with my love of sport and my hate of a real job, I suppose, speaking with Kev, I thought, you know what, I'm going to do something for prostate cancer in his name, and hopefully do something that people will get some attention, get some money in the pot for the charity, and also follow his advice, which is to go out and live my dream before it's too late. And so I did.
Well, most people at that point would probably run a marathon, let alone run a marathon in every country of the world. But I mean, how do you then go about funding this kind of challenge? What goes into planning something like this? There may be a bit of a misconception that you come from a wealthy background and you're able to fund this kind of things, but a lot of work goes into the planning and preparation, doesn't it? And you have to sacrifice a lot.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not born into, I mean, relatively speaking, in the world, I think everybody that will ever view this video is born into a lot of money, in the relative speaking. But yeah. Absolutely, I'm not born into money. Average family home, and I had a lot of opportunity for sport. And I think we define wealth in my eyes now as freedom, and the amount of freedom we had. And as a kid, I had the freedom to do music, do sport, to go places I wanted to do. So yeah, the funding, the mission to get to the start line, it took a solid 2 years from that time in the desert to actually January the 6th, when I set off in 2018, to actually get there. And that journey was horrible. I expected it to be fun, and it was for a few months. And then I got down to the nitty gritty, and the Post-it notes became A3 paper, and then A3 paper became a whole wall, and a whole wall became a whole room, and then it became a whole house. And this just absolutely expanded and seeped into every corner of my life, all family and friends and everybody I knew. And the answer to your question directly is, I borrowed the money. I begged for the money. I was handed money by complete strangers. I had businesses that believed in me. But even so, we raised some money to get the trip started, but the majority of the money came from my own pocket. And when I say my own pocket, my family's own pocket, the borrowed money that I still owe now, and I will be paying that money back for many years to come. But it was had I been given, let's say £1 million, it cost us nearly £1 million to do the whole trip. If I was given £1 million to do the trip, it wouldn't have felt the same as it does now, because that money was such a stress and a focus, and it made me real, because I wasn't just being handed a bucket load of cash. I got given some money, but it was nowhere near that much. And so we really did scrape the barrel. And I can't stress enough how close we came to not only not starting the trip, but really genuinely not completing the mission for so many reasons. But finance was such a big one towards the end, because we were just in positions where, you know, if we had one flight cancel, everything was up the spout. We would have wasted 50-60 grand in an instant and then be lost. So, you know, and those moments were real, and there were a lot of tears on the road, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. And you actually, in a recent interview I listened to with yourself, you stressed the importance of human kindness along the way as well, and the random acts of kindness that came from strangers. There was one incident in Barcelona where a lady, I think, let you stay at her accommodation, and yeah, you really played on how important that was.
Oh, absolutely. The whole trip would have been cost much more, but I wouldn't have had the same experience. And it was vital for the success of sharing the journey, and sharing the journey then led to donations coming in, because, you know, without word of mouth, without social media, without the internet, I wouldn't have even attempted this trip, because we wouldn't have gained the fundraising that we were after, you know. And so that's a miracle in itself. And this particular lady in Barcelona, who I'm sworn to secrecy to, I can't use her name because she just wants to be anonymous. She's a brilliant woman. And I had many people like her that hosted me. I stayed with 80 odd families around the world, some of which didn't really know who I was at all. They just, you know, were told by a neighbor that spoke English that I should host them, and they hosted me. You know, that was the kind of thing that happened. And, you know, in the middle of Honduras, as an example, with a family that didn't speak any English whatsoever, and I was there just because they wanted to help. And that happened all over the world. And I mean, this incident in Barcelona was just amplified because she managed to support in so many ways. She not only picked me up from the airport, she helped put some money in my pocket. She then drove me to 2 other countries to complete my marathons. She organized food for me. She literally did everything. And then that was repeated many times by lots of people around the world. And I was very lucky that when we crossed the finish line in Athens, having completed the world, which we really didn't think at times was going to happen, we got to the point where I had not all of them, many of the people I met around the world that had helped me actually there. And we sat down and had dinner in Athens, and it was a very emotional time, but a joyful one.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. And in terms of running itself, I mean, how do you begin to prepare for running in all these different places? You've got to deal with temperatures, different altitudes, changing from country to country. I mean, physically, did you ever feel like you might not get to the end of each marathon, and halfway through, just purely from a physical sense, did you feel as though, you know, the challenge might be a bit too much?
It's difficult to answer that, because again, this is one of the biggest troubles I have with recounting the journey, is that the me before the trip, the me during the trip, and the me now are all very different individuals, because I'm in different mindsets for such a long period of time. You know, 2 years of planning, 2 years of doing, and now I'm out the other side talking about it. And the mind has a brilliant way of forgetting the bad stuff. But in my honest answer to that is, I didn't struggle physically to finish the runs. There was just many obstacles to overcome in getting there. And so, because I'd done so much, you know, by the time I'd finished the trip, you know, there's 196 countries in the world, but I'd already done 400 and something odd marathons before I even started. So my body was well trained and I could run. It's just when you're then chased by dogs, when you're hit by a car, or when you're shot at, or when you get locked up, or all this sort of stuff, that is a little bit of a blocker. And so, you know, you have to overcome those. But there were times when I was running in torrential rain in some of the most tropical, beautiful places that, you know, the day before people were sunbathing and I arrived and it was torrential rain, and then ran in the rain and left again, you know. And I'm finishing writing my book at the moment about the whole trip, and there's many moments where I'm like, I can't really believe I was in that position, you know. I missed a massive festival in the sun, glorious sunshine festival by a day, and I landed in an empty city and ran in the rain and left again, you know. And so, seen the world, but not always at its best.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned there being chased by dogs, being shot at. Can you recall these moments? What happened and where were they?
Oh, there's so many to mention. I mean, there's so many incidents. Just little things like being hit by the cars, hit by a few cars, but some of them were minor, just knocked to the floor and a few bruises and like close to broken bones, but nothing major. And honestly, that's the way my life was. It was like, right, well, I can still move, so let's carry on. And no, I was hit in a country called the Central African Republic, which, as the name suggests, is in Central Africa, and particularly not very, but a dangerous enough place. And I was just running on my own along the side of a grassy verge about a metre or so high, and a lorry's wind mirror just clipped my elbow. Fortunately, it wasn't my hips or my head, because that would have done some much bigger damage and potentially stopped the journey. But I just broke my elbow and fell over the side and felt sorry for myself for a while, and filled myself with painkillers and got on with the job. But that's one of those examples where in bed in the evening that night, I don't even think about it, because it was like, right, well, I've got the marathon done, that's a success, now let's move on to the next place. I was doing 3 marathons in 3 countries every week for nearly 100 weeks, and so it was intense. Things like the dogs, heat, and political volatility were my 3 big challenges, with visas and access and leaders saying stupid things, which we're very familiar with at the moment. And the dogs in countries that we're used to are more often than not on a lead or have an owner, have been trained, have been microchipped. But dogs, as I'm sure around all over the world, there's a lot of stray dogs that like to take a little bit of a chunk out of people every now and then. And so I was bitten, but most of the time I was just chased and scared. And if a dog jumps out on the right hand side of the road, and I dart into the road onto the left, and there's a car coming, and that's game over. And that kind of stuff. My biggest dangers were the ones that we all face every day. Things like cars and not eating enough and dehydration and stuff. So, yeah.
And at any point, did you have an opportunity? I mean, I've run a marathon. I've only run 1 marathon in Amsterdam, but I had a chance after that just sort of sit down, relax, have a good bit of food, and sort of think about what I'd achieved personally. Did you even have a moment's rest where you could sort of sit back, enjoy what the country that you were in had to offer before moving on? Or was it literally a case of just preparing your body for the next episode?
The answer is both. I actually had quite a good amount of time in some countries. I would say a dozen countries I had more than 3 days. But the rest of them, sometimes they were just 12-hour periods where, due to flight restrictions or my visa, or the fact that if we didn't hurry up, then we weren't going to get to the finish line on time, that kind of thing, I had to keep moving on. But no, I spent a little bit more time in Peru. I spent a bit more time in South Africa, a couple extra days in Bali. There's a few places that I spent a little bit longer, and I also managed to shoehorn in the world major marathons as well, just because I thought, well, we're on a marathon running trip around the world, it would be silly not to. And so I was in the US a little bit, because they have 3 of the 6 events, and I spent some time on the West Coast. But other than that, things got a bit stressful. We ran out of time, and so I was hopping from one place to the other, and we bookended the journey more or less with islands. I started in the north, in the Americas, and I did a lot of the Caribbean in the beginning months, and then in the final stages, in month 22, month 23, I was in the Pacific Islands. And so most of those places are kind of weather dependent, flight dependent, and dog dependent. I found out that there's a big dog community in the Pacific Islands.
And I suspect you get asked a lot what your favorite country was to run in, perhaps somewhere you never expected to be enjoyable, because in the news, on the media here, we see obviously images of certain countries around the world, and naturally that tarnishes our view of them. Was there anywhere in particular that you were surprised at how lovely it was to run, and you really enjoyed the sort of local culture?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, everywhere I was, barring, I'd say, a handful of, exceptions. Barring a handful of exceptions, I experienced the overwhelming feeling that all of my preconceptions of different countries were more or less wrong, like 99% of the time. And a few of those were because of the running, or because of the maybe the slightly wealthier or slightly poorer, all sorts of different things. But there's a few highlights. I had a fantastic time in Nepal, running in the mountains, did some hiking there. I had a few extra days, and I had amazing people. In Guatemala, for example, early on in the trip, I met a guy called Nick who came in and supported for the run. I ran around this beautiful erupting volcano in a village called Antigua. And then he and I stayed in touch, and we have now since, during the trip, ran in all of the other continents together. And he has good connections, and he runs this series of races called the Impact Marathons, and they do good in various different countries. And so he was like, yeah, well, I'm going to be here. And he organised Nepal for me. We were bumping into each other in like connecting hubs in Africa, like in Addis Airport. And so, you know, more often than not, the great moments were a combination between brilliant people and brilliant place. And so I experienced that. Yeah, I mean, I'd be here all week if I was telling you all the good bits. There was a lot of good bits.
And it is those moments shared that obviously make it. I mean, the running is such an important part of it, but it is the people that have made the journey for you along the way. And I guess now for life, you have these contacts all around the world that you can call upon if you're ever visiting.
Yeah, absolutely. If anybody's listening or watching this, then needs some contacts for a holiday or anywhere, then let me know. I know lots of hotels not to go to, and I know lots to go to. But more importantly, I've got lots of brilliant friends that are so selfless and genuinely kind-hearted, completely welcoming people that would honestly open their doors to anybody that was a decent person, you know. And I experienced it quite in an impactful way when I came back for 3 days over my first Christmas. So right in the middle of the journey, you know, I left in January. I came back for 3 days at Christmas to get my new passports. Got through many passports on the journey, so I had to keep popping back and picking up another one. And at Christmas, on Christmas Day, I had 61 nationalities message me on Christmas Day wishing me a happy Christmas, and that was from the preceding countries that I'd been to. And so my phone book has expanded somewhat.
Yeah, and so your whole journey was underpinned by this notion from your friend Kevin about not wasting time and getting out there and utilizing your health and the people in the world as well. I mean, this lockdown has probably given people a little bit of an idea as well of what life is like when it's sort of stripped back. Kevin has taught you the preciousness of life as well, and that seems to be the main thing that underpins your challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got this theatre tour which we were in the middle of when the lockdown happened, and the theatre tour will continue once everything is fixed, if that ever will be, you know, properly. And so I'm hoping that I can share my messages, and my key messages is exactly that. We, all of us, me included, still now to a degree, we take stuff for granted. That's a given, and we all know we take stuff for granted. But the big thing that we kind of forget about is our life. You know, every single second that is ticking by, as morbid as it sounds, is a moment closer to death. And we don't know. We assume that death is going to be when we're 80 odd, if we're lucky. You know, but that doesn't happen for so many people. Even with the best medicine, stuff can happen, and life can be taken away from you without you knowing about it instantly. And so I just have this complete drive to fill my days, and when I get into bed in the evening, I'm like, yeah, have I done what I wanted to do today? And I think if more people thought like that, then there could be a bit of chaos, because there would be people, you know, having a lot of fun. But there's a happy medium. You know, I'm not trying to preach to everybody to sell their house and not look after their kids and, you know, all that sort of stuff. It just live with intent. You know, we often fumble without the intent from one day to the next, going, oh yeah, I'd really love to learn to sail. I'll go and do that when I'm retired. No, if you really want to do it, then you do it now, because you don't know if that's going to happen. You just have to get a happy balance between getting some money to do that and realizing that, you know, you don't want to be slogging behind a desk if you're not enjoying it. There's many people that do enjoy their jobs. But if you're complaining about something, which many people do, working behind a desk, make a change. And so I did make a change, and fortunately I had a good time in the process.
And has there been any sort of come down after this? I mean, a lot of the time when you take on a big challenge, I'd imagine, or if people achieve something in their line of work or have worked really hard towards something, afterwards you almost, if it ends, you sort of almost lose that sense of purpose a little bit. Did you get that once the challenge had finished? Because of course, I mean, I don't think we actually touched on it earlier. You did sell your house, you sold a lot of your possessions to make this happen, and then you kind of come back. Did you feel almost like you'd crash back down to reality?
It was strange. Everybody said to me that would happen, and I was expecting it. And so much so that even throughout the journey, I had a psychologist that was on call if in any case I was getting, you know, bogged down with the mission or worried or, you know, all sorts of different stuff, just had them on call. But I never really needed to use them, because when I came back, it's in my nature to then build the next thing. And I knew that it was going to be a year of speaking and about the journey and trying to share the message to encourage others to do the same. And so I think the honest answer is I'm not there yet. I haven't had that moment yet, because ever since getting back, I had a couple of weeks where I didn't do much. And that was after about 3 months of media. And then I was then touring, and now the lockdown happened, and I'm now in the depths of planning my next big expeditions. And so my mind is on expedition mode again, talking about what we can do and finding funding and all that sort of stuff. And so I haven't stopped, and I'm not planning to stop. But that's not to say I haven't stopped and appreciated what I've achieved, because I have, and I'm very, very very, very grateful for it. And I often have some moments just to myself, or walking on the beach or running most of the time, and I just think about what I've done and how lucky I am, when things pop up on the news and I say, oh, I've been there, and the amount of people I have to text to make sure they're okay, because I've seen stuff happen in countries that, I'm always glued to the World News Channel, because there's lots of stuff happening in the world. And so I know I haven't had that big slump. I think I could have had it had I not filled my time. But I'm just grateful for what I had, and for looking to the future.
It's a great outlook. And what is next for you? I mean, do you even attempt to top the world record that you now hold? What is next? I mean, does your girlfriend sort of sit next to you and think, what is he planning now? How does it work?
Yeah, I'll probably, and I'm going to go and try and have a nap in every country in the world. No, that would be a good answer. No, the plan is to set some big records involving North America. It's all kind of under wraps at the moment, but what I'm going for is going to be a lot more running, a multi-year project over 3 years. In some incredibly beautiful places, incredibly well documented, and with a little bit of a twist in terms of, we're not doing something for raising money. We're doing something to raise some form of other unit, which I'll be talking about in the future. I'm not really allowed to say much. It is very exciting, and honestly, I enjoy this period of planning. But it's also with the coronavirus happening, there's so much uncertainty in the world. Not just, all of a sudden we don't talk about Brexit, and if that happens, something's really happened, and the coronavirus has absolutely wiped out the world's economy, belief in the future. There's so much stuff, and so it's all up in the air. But I'm just grateful to be running and be able to plan this stuff, knowing that I've got at least another 18 months of hardcore training to be done between now and then. And I suppose, to answer your question of how it works with the training, and the planning, more to the point, it's lots of getting things wrong. Even though I've already done this massive trip, you still have to start from scratch and build a team. I'm in the closing stages of building a team now, where I'm just getting people interested in supporting, and then finding the funding to be able to pay them. And then once that's done, we will then iron out the details of the trip, begin the journey to the start line then. But there's going to be another 9 months, I reckon, of pre-work before we can even begin the journey to the start line. It takes a little while to think about it and get things wrong again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's the important thing there, that people will realize, is that so much planning does go into any challenge of this scale. And at the moment, your message and the message from your friend Kevin is more apt than ever, given the current circumstances, about the fragility of life, and how it's important that we kind of make the most of our time. So thank you very much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
No, likewise. Thank you very much. I hope some people will see this, listen to this, and get off the backsides and grab something that they want to do with both hands, and never let go till they succeed. So that would make me happy.
If you enjoyed that episode of the Clubhouse, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and keep your eyes peeled for more videos coming soon.